This happened in 2007 when myself and some friends, two 17-year-old females from Ireland, spent 2 weeks in a small town in Italy to take part in a language course. We were studying Italian at school and needed to improve our spoken Italian before the exams. In this small town, there was nothing much to do for two teenage girls, so we looked forward to going to the local bar each night and having a few drinks. The bar we are in, like a lot of places in Europe, free pours the alcohol, so although we have only had around 3 vodka and cokes, in reality it is probably the equivalent of splitting a large bottle of vodka. Basically, we are plastered. We end up, unfortunately, talking to these two Italian guys who seem to be about 23, maybe 24 years old. One of the guys is really quiet, so his friend does all of the talking. After about 15 minutes, it becomes very apparent that the talkative guy is interested in my friend, who at this stage is very worse for wear and practically falling asleep at the table. He becomes increasingly predatory, squishing himself as close as possible to her and was quite forcefully caressing her arms and legs. At this point, I decide that enough is enough and that we have to go home. Of course, they follow us, so I'm trying to hold at my friend and steer her home while this guy is becoming more and more aggressive. After about 10 minutes of walking and me continually telling them to fuck off and leave us alone, things take a bit of a turn for the worse. He aggressively starts to try and pull my friend away from me, and when I hold on, it's like a game of tug-of-war. He starts to get violent, slapping my hands and arms, and at one point narrowly misses my face. At this point, I'm yelling at my friend to sober up and be of some use. Like I said, it was a small Italian town and this was a midweek evening, so no one was about in the streets. We are pretty much on our own. After a few more minutes of struggling, it seems like they finally take the hint and go away. We walk a bit more down the street and my friend is managing to sober up. From where we are, we have to take the next left, and then our apartment is on the next street on the right. We're about to turn left when I see a newspaper stand further up the street. The stand is closed, obviously, and faces the street where our flat is located. It is very dark, but I can just make out a sort of circular shape above the newspaper stand. As I'm looking, the circular shape ducks down and I realize that it was someone's head. The guys are hiding behind the newspaper stand with God knows what intentions. Sheer panic sets in as I'm trying to assess the situation, wondering if these guys are really going to hurt us, and how we would be able to avoid them seeing us go into our apartment from their hiding place. I decide that, instead of turning left immediately, we'll keep walking until the next left, and then take the next left turning onto that street. If you imagine, it is a U-shape, so we have 2 options for getting home from where we are, with our flat being located right in the middle of the street. We walk a bit further and take the next left. On this street, we cannot see the guys or the newspaper stand. Trying not to cry, I turn to my friend and say, "We are in a very dangerous situation. When we get to our street on the left, they will see us. I don't know what they're going to do, but you have to run to the door. Run as fast as you can. Don't waste your energy thinking about them. Use all of your energy for running." At this point, she starts to cry, having not realized the severity of the situation until now. She hands me the house key from her bag, which I hold tightly in my hand, prepared to open the door quickly. As we reach the corner of our street, we see 2 shadows at the other end. Both duos simply stand and watch each other from a distance for a brief moment, and then I whisper out of the side of my mouth, "Run." We start sprinting towards our apartment. Bear in mind, it's quite a long street. When the guys see us, they start legging it down the street. My friend starts screaming and I'm yelling at her to move faster. After what seems like forever, we reach the door of the apartment and I'm frantically trying to push the key into the lock. She's screaming, "Hurry up! They're coming! They're going to get us!" I finally manage to open the door and we practically fall through, slamming it shut. Literally 2 seconds after we shut the door, the guys arrive and start frantically trying the handle, banging on the transparent door with their fists. Me and my friend are just sitting on the stairs crying, trying to catch our breath. We watch them as they try to bust open the door with their shoulders, screaming curses in Italian. They eventually stop and we walk up the stairs to our flat. About 15 minutes later, I walk quietly down the stairs to check that they're gone. They're both still there, standing with their hands and faces pressed against the glass, just staring.
I was 19 and just started my first year at university in London. In England, there's a traditional Freshers' Week with lots of events and parties for new undergraduates. Another thing about London is that many students don't live in dorms, simply because rent prices are far too high for universities to afford enough housing for all their students. So I lived by myself in a small studio and would have to travel alone to parties and back home again. I was a bit wary about London because it was a big city and far less safe than the small town I grew up in. But I lived in a fairly good area and took all precautions of not walking alone at night. I ended up living in London for 5 years, but ironically, the scariest encounter I ever had was on an underground train full of people in the most touristy part of town. It proved to me that encountering a creepy stranger can literally happen anywhere. Anytime. So I was getting ready to attend freshers party at a famous nightclub, Fabric London. I spent ages doing my makeup and was wearing a Rocawear top, which was all the rage in the early 2000s. Most girls know how to make themselves look very attractive with enough effort, so I don't think it's vain to admit that I was a bit self-conscious of attracting attention from the wrong places. I wanted to look good at the party, but didn't want to catch the eye of any strangers on the way to or from the club. Also, my boyfriend at the time, who knew London better than me, actually advised me to get a pepper spray because you could never be too sure. I had the pepper spray in my coat pocket, and I initially felt quite silly carrying it. It was only 8 p.m. when I caught the underground train across central London. The platform was very crowded with tourists and commuters. I was squeezing my way down the platform when I caught a glimpse of a disheveled-looking man standing amongst the crowd. He was maybe 40, very tall with gray, greasy hair and a long, dirty coat. He was muttering to himself and looked like a drunk, homeless person, which wasn't too unusual in a big city. However, I decided I'd rather not be in the same carriage, so I went further down the platform without breaking my stride or making it seem obvious I was avoiding him. In fact, I went by so quickly, I assumed he never even saw me since the platform was very full and he looked dazed and unfocused, mumbling to himself. The train arrived and I got a seat. London Underground trains are extremely narrow, so there are simply 2 long rows of seats facing each other that runs down the entire carriage. I was mildly relieved to have avoided the homeless man and started looking forward to the party. However, to my absolute terror, when the train stopped at the next station, the creepy man rushed out of the carriage he was in and came into mine. He must have noticed me earlier because he was staring at me as he made a beeline for the empty seat next to me. What happened next made my blood freeze. Immediately after sitting down, he leans over until his mouth is inches from my ear and slurred with a foul, alcohol-laden breath, "If you fucking move a muscle, I am going to stab you." He had both hands in his pockets, so I didn't know if he was hiding a knife. It was primal instinct that told me I had to get away from this dangerous madman, so I stood up and rushed down the carriage even though I knew it was against his instructions. At this point, all the other passengers knew something was wrong, but instead of intervening, they all moved to the other end of the train, trying to get as far away from the situation as possible. This is the part where people often get angry, wondering why nobody tried to help me. But thinking back to that moment, I honestly don't blame the other passengers one tiny bit. In their place, I would have done exactly the same thing. As I moved down the carriage, he got up and followed me. I stood by the door praying for the train to reach the next station so I could get out and get help from someone who worked on the platform. I was fully expecting him to attack me any second, and I had my finger on the pepper spray that was in my coat pocket. However, I realized with a sinking feeling that he was so intoxicated, the pepper spray may not even have made a difference. His entire face was a sickly dark red color. His eyes were pale blue, completely unblinking and bloodshot. He leaned over me and started shouting gibberish. I only made out a few words, including "your boyfriend" and the word "fuck" several times. I had no idea who he thought I was or what he was shouting about. Maybe he was suffering from some sort of psychosis or schizophrenic episode. The train finally pulled into the next station, and to my absolute relief, he got off the train. He staggered across the platform talking to himself, still with both hands in his pockets. I never knew if he was holding a knife or whether he ended up attacking someone else. Stabbings happen so regularly in London that it's not even considered real news, so most incidents only get a tiny story on a back page of the newspaper. As soon as the door shut again, all the other people in the train started exclaiming, "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" I was frozen with fear, but surprisingly, relatively okay because of the huge relief of seeing him go away. I went straight to the party and actually enjoyed myself a lot. However, after that experience, I started taking taxis whenever I could afford it.
This next story is told in the perspective of a female. Obviously. This is the story of me, my baby daughter, and an older Indian gentleman who became our guardian angel. 6 months ago, I gave birth to a little girl, Clea. Her father and I were over the moon that she had finally arrived, but the process of getting her here was gruesome. I'm a small woman, and she was a surprisingly big baby, almost 10 pounds. A very cute and precious almost 10 pounds baby at that, but it made for a hard delivery to say the least. 7 hours into labor with no signs of progress, meconium, which is signs of fetal distress, showed up and I was whisked into an emergency C-section. We were finally sent home 3 days later with a bill of good health, but my recovery was slow and painful. I ended up having to take a much longer than standard maternity leave. Clea and I, mainly me, slowly made our way to feeling good. And about 2 months ago, I felt up to snuggling her into the baby sling and walking the 4 blocks to our yoga studio for a very simple mommy and me classes every Tuesday. The real treat was afterwards at the Dunkin' Donuts next door, where I would get a smoothie afterwards. Vinod is a 60-year-old man who works behind the counter. He had a bright demeanor that instantly made me happy, always telling me how bright I made his day. He loved seeing my smile, and one day I was going to have to ditch my rotten husband to come back to India with him. This was said in playful context, of course. He wasn't creepy. He adored Clea. She's one of those babies that has rolls all over, and he was always saying how big and healthy she looked. He promised when she got old enough to eat real food, he would give her as many munchkins as she could want. The day Clea turned 5 months was a Tuesday. We headed to yoga and then to visit Vinod, who, as usual, cooed at the baby, and gave me a free smoothie for being such a good mom at only 5 months. We said our goodbyes, and I, in a rare moment of absent-mindedness, decide I'm going to take the alley shortcut across the street to get to the block I need to be on. It was such a bright day, the alley only had a little shadow in it, and it was less than 14 feet long. I didn't even have a concern in my mind. I know, incredibly stupid. I made it past the garbage cans when I felt something cold against my shoulder blade. Turning around, I saw a man with what looked like a stun gun, I have no clue about weapons, pointed in my direction. "Your wallet. Give me that. Give me your rings, your earrings, your phone. Anything of value on you is mine now." I didn't know what to do, so I started sobbing as I shakily reached for my shoulder bag. He pressed the stun gun into the side of my abdomen. "Quiet. I'll use this. I don't care about the baby. I don't care about..." I never found out what he didn't care about, because the corner of my eye suddenly filled with a flash of brown, pink, and orange. It was Vinod, armed with one of those handled trays that the employees use to slide bagels into the oven. He got in one good hit, and the man was off like a shot. I'm shaking and crying. Clea is wailing, and Vinod, well, I was afraid he would keel over. Red, panting, and looking around all wild-eyed, he walked me back to the shop to call the police and my husband. Nothing ever turned up, but Vinod has my undying gratitude and appreciation for saving me in a moment of stupidity that went terribly wrong. Whatever major holiday it is, I don't care if he doesn't celebrate it, he gets a present from me and Clea. He deserves more than that, but I just don't know how to thank him to the degree he deserves.